The continued despise for LGBT plus people from the Black and other marginalized communities must come to an end. We have continued to hear the rhetoric of, why are they heard so quickly? Why should they gain so many rights so easily when we had to fight hundreds of years for ours? They have not earned those rights yet. They must struggle more. They are a new community. What are we saying? What are we doing? Is this not the so-called slave mentality that oppressors attempted to instill in our ancestors over 155 years ago? This thinking is a well-documented strategy for institutions and people to stay in power. To have the oppressed fight amongst themselves so the actions of those in power go unexamined. In our history, African American history, that is to make the field slaves and house slaves fight amongst one another for the optimal position and status that a slave can receive. This goes on while the masters continue making wealth off our ancestors' broken bodies and poisoned minds. If we fast forward to the present day in the US, we see that Black people and LGBT plus people are both oppressed communities. And obviously we don't all share the same thought process, but there is a large group of people in the Black community that have succumbed to this modernized slave mentality. It's not that those who think this way are bad people, as much as the oppressive institutions have done a good job in portraying that human rights are finite. If rights are finite, then for one group to gain rights, another group must lose rights. As we argue amongst each other on who deserves what rights, how much each group should have, and why others shouldn't be afforded more, the masters sit in their penthouses and mansions, acquiring wealth off our broken bodies and poisoned minds. If we are to break from the common misconceptions stated around the LGBT plus plight, we see that they have too gone through more than their fair share of struggles. It was in 1866, through the Civil Rights Act, that Black people were legally allowed marriage. It was not until 2015, 149 years later, that same-sex marriage was legal in the US. A basic right that is an expected milestone within US culture was denied from both of our communities. Same with workers' rights. In 2020, just 2 years ago, sexual orientation and gender identity were finally included under the term sex, to be incorporated in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This law federally barred employers to discriminate/deny jobs to LGBT plus people. Black people fought for this law and protection leading up to 1964, when we were legally awarded the same protection from employer discrimination, 56 years previous. This holds true even in legal protection from hate crimes. In 1969, under the identities of race, color, religion, or national origin, people were to be protected from violent crimes based upon those characteristics. Finally, in 2009, LGBT plus people were included in the Matthew Shepard Act, which added gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, and disability to the previous protected identities. These are just a few of the endless examples dethroning even the us against them mentality, exposing the thought that if there is an amount of time a group is to struggle for their rights, then the LGBT plus people have been well overdue, just as we as Black people have been too. However, let me remind you that there are groups that have not had to fight for rights. Some groups have been born into these rights and were always included in all the laws ever written within this country, which we all should have been included in the first place. Those people born into rights and protections from day one is proof of the infinite rights that exist in this country and world. Proof that this country has enough space for each one of us, no matter our color, race, sex, gender, religion, country of origin, age, ability, etc., to have the same number of rights and protections. Again, to portray the picture of finite rights allows for those viewed with lesser to be manipulated and taken advantage of. Let me venture back to the focus at hand with our LGBT+ community members. If you continue to feel resentful that the LGBT+ community might gain more than we have ever earned, let us look towards history. Some say one distinct factor to identify a race of people or community is history. It's almost as if a people do not have a documented history, then they may have not existed. This is an issue within the African American community. Due to Africans being stolen from their homes and enslaved, it is extremely difficult to trace today's families' lineages. Some families' histories being completely lost to time. This is nothing less than a tragedy. Although you may live a full life not knowing your ancestors, this knowledge provides building blocks for the following generations to come. Our people's history provides a wealth of wisdom that propels those forwards who have the opportunity to be immersed in it. Just as science evolves and grows stronger from an entire timeline of predecessors passing tips and formulas for those who follow afterwards, our ancestors do the same. From their lives and stories, we gain knowledge and wisdom. We no longer must begin life at ground zero, but instead we are equipped knowing the greatness that has existed before us and provided a path that we may travel down, and even further for those after us. This is the power that exists through history. If we cannot leave something behind for our children, our race is doomed to be reset every generation. We as African Americans may not know our ancestral lineage extremely well, but through the collection of so many families facing the same travesty, being slavery, we are able to compile a distinct history. In fact, being brought to North America and the attempt of slave masters to eradicate our African history brought rise to a new categorization of people, a new race, and therefore new history of the African American people. Although our new race was born characterized on the color of our skin, we all know Black people have existed throughout human history. We know this to be true. Some even suggest that Black people were the first of the human race. Just as our scientific studies and nature suggest, Black people have always existed. It is the same for those identified as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and so on. The largest difference between our histories and the LGBT+ community history is the amount of documentation. We see that Black history has been documented by many different groups of people over an extended period of time. This allows for Blackness as an identity to become a norm in society, whereas the lack of history categorized as LGBT+ documented history has been absent among a majority of groups. And as stated previously, some say if your people do not have documented history, it is almost as if they may have not existed. And here we are today. Many people claiming those of LGBT+ identity are a new community who didn't exist until recently. That since they are a new race/community to this world, they too must struggle as long and as hard as the other groups before them. Then they will be deserving of equal rights. Clearly, this is a flaw in logic for those who still hold the belief of an us versus them mentality, and those with the finite rights belief. Both of our communities have existed just as long as one another. We have not suffered the same oppression, but both of us have been unrightfully marginalized. Both of our communities deserve better from the world. The least we could do is recognize each other's differences and similarities through respect and begin building an allyship versus creating yet another enemy. My final topic that I would like to discuss is what it means to be a trailblazer. Those who we regard as trailblazers are of the utmost important members of our society. These are people that were beginning from ground zero. Those with the world against them, with no path paved and no GPS to tell them where they should be going or how to get there. The only items these blazers were equipped with was their moral compass and torch-like fiery spirits. Knowing they wanted to journey north to something better, and having an idea of which way that might be, they ran into whitewater rivers, unclimbable mountains, dangerous towns, and deadly storms along the way. For these challenges, they built bridges across the rivers. They left trails to manage the mountains. They found trustworthy allies in the towns and raised shelters to weather the storms. This is what trailblazers do along their journey. But they don't build these bridges, leave these trails, and raise these structures to return south. They do so for others. Others also looking for something better. For those looking north. This is the story that brought all of us black folks from slaves rebelling and escaping the plantations, to Negroes marching and protesting on Washington, and to African Americans leading our nation. This is the path that so many of us black people have trailblazed, searching for that something better. And we didn't leave those trails in case we wanted to go back. We left them for others looking to move forward. If you wonder why the LGBT plus community is finally able to move forward, to be heard, and gain so many rights, it's the bridges, the paths, the allies, and the shelters we left for anyone looking for that something better. Don't get me wrong, countless members of the LGBT plus community have trailblazed too, but we left a well-defined path, which several groups have journeyed north upon in the US. And this is one of the greatest achievements us as African Americans, as blacks, as Negroes, and whatever else we call one another have achieved. We have earned the utmost importance title of trailblazer within our society, and have done so for not only black rights, but human rights. A feat nothing short of immaculate. What a shame it would be to tarnish that title and work by journeying south down our own trail just to tell others, this is our bridge, you can't cross here. What a sad existence it would be to build a better world only to tell others they are not welcomed in it. Have we not been survivors of that ideology? Have we forgotten the unquenchable thirst for freedom when it was but an arbitrary skin tone away? Have we lost our empathy fighting the war on race? Have we lost our humanity? These are the tolls we pay when we say, we did not trailblaze for you. The LGBT plus community have indeed used some strategic outlines in the fight for progress and rights that black people have laid the foundation for. We have trailblazed routes for justice, allowing other groups to follow in our footsteps, to stand alongside us as humans. Let us truly embrace our ancestors' work, our own work, and the work of our LGBT plus friends. We have come a long way from the slave mentality, from the finite rights belief, and the us versus them ideology that has plagued our communities for far too long. The insidious veil has been lifted from our eyes, and we now have the conscious choice to see one another for who we truly are. We have all had to endure an unjust suffering for far too long. We have all had to carry our ancestors upon our backs as others attempted to eradicate their history. We have all had to bear a cruel and agonizing journey in search of a better place. We have all suffered these incomprehensible weights for so long that they have made us strong. Strong enough to uplift every marginalized community in the entire world if we wish to do so. The continued despise for LGBT plus people from the Black and other marginalized communities must come to an end, because we have all suffered enough to know that pain and the humanity that exists inside of it. And we know it will not be our mutual oppressors who decide our suffering must come to an end. It must be us. It must be our marginalized communities together. It must be all marginalized communities and peoples together that stand with one another to say Black rights, gay rights, trans rights, women's rights, Muslims' rights, children's rights, disabled rights, refugee rights, and so on are all human rights. And we will not stand nor expect anything lesser than to be treated for what we all are: human.